Good morning, students. The topic for today's class is transport of carbon dioxide. So before going into the details of carbon dioxide transport, it is worthwhile to recapitulate some basic principles and laws governing the diffusion of gases. So in your intermediate, you have all these laws. Just will revise them. So the gas molecules have kinetic energy, which will make them to be in a continuous random motion. So these molecules bounce against each other or against the wall of the container and exert a pressure. So this pressure is dependent on concentration, volume and temperature. So P is directly proportional to N or concentration and inversely proportional to volume. That is P is inversely related to volume, which is nothing but Boyle's law, and P is directly proportional to temperature, which is nothing but Charles' law. And then when you put all these pressures relations and its relations, we'll get an equation P is equal to nRT by V. And then Dalton's law of partial pressure. So this law states that the total pressure exerted by a mixture of gases is equal to the sum of partial pressure of all gases present in the mixture. Thus, the partial pressure refers to pressure exerted by any one gas present in a mixture of gases. So there is a mixture of gases. If you want a partial pressure of one gas, we have to calculate it by multiplying its fractional concentration by the total pressure. Suppose in the atmospheric air, which is having a pressure of 760 mmHg, it is a mixture of oxygen and nitrogen. Oxygen percentage is 21% and nitrogen 79%. So if you want to know the partial pressure of oxygen, PO2 is equal to 21 by 100. It is the fractional concentration and multiplied by total atmospheric pressure, that is 760. So 760 multiplied by 21 by 100 will give you 160 mmHg. And then Henry's law. So this law is regarding the partial pressure of gases in water and tissues. So the partial pressure of gas in a solution is determined not only by its concentration but also by its solubility coefficient. Solubility coefficient is constant for each gas that equates the gas content and the partial pressure of the gas. So the Henry's law states that when temperature is kept constant, the content of gas dissolved in any solution is directly proportional to the partial pressure of gas. So what is the gas content? It is nothing but volume of gas per unit volume of liquid that is present. And solubility is a major determinant of number of molecules present. So higher solubility increases the rate of diffusion because it is having more number of gas molecules. So Henry's law is content of gas dissolved in any solution is directly proportional to the partial pressure of gas. So if it is having more number of molecules, that will be causing its higher solubility. So I hope it's clear to you. And also one more point is the atmospheric air entering the respiratory passages during inspiration is humidified by the water vapors from the conducting passages. So at body temperature, the vapor pressure of water in the alveolar air is 47 mmHg. To the most important topic, respiratory membrane. So this may be asked as a short or a very short question also. So it is otherwise called pulmonary membrane or alveolo-capillary membrane. So respiratory membrane, we have two other synonyms for that. It is pulmonary membrane and also alveolo-capillary membrane. And before that, what is a respiratory unit? So it is composed of bronchiole, alveolar ducts, atria and alveoli. So there are about 300 million respiratory units in the two lungs. So gas exchange occurs through the membranes of all the structures forming a respiratory unit, but not only the alveoli. So in a respiratory unit there are bronchiole, alveolar duct, atria and alveoli. So exchange of gases occurs through the membranes of all structures forming the respiratory unit. So you remember this point. And now we'll see what is this respiratory membrane. So it separates the capillary blood from alveolar air. So the exchange of gases occurs between capillary blood and alveolar air. So the gases have to be exchanged through this respiratory membrane. So what are the layers of the respiratory membrane? So this is very important question. So layers of the respiratory membrane starting from the alveolar side. So from the alveolar side, if you see, this is the first layer, fluid and surfactant layer. So this is the first layer, and then alveolar epithelium. So this one, alveolar epithelium and epithelial basement membrane, and then interstitial space, and then capillary basement membrane, and then capillary endothelium. So how many layers are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So first one, fluid and surfactant, and then alveolar epithelium, epithelial basement membrane, interstitial fluid, capillary basement membrane, and then capillary endothelium. So these 6 layers you have to remember, and then draw this diagram if the question comes as respiratory membrane. So now we'll see the various factors affecting the diffusion across the respiratory membrane. So there are 4 factors: thickness of respiratory membrane, and surface area of the respiratory membrane, diffusion coefficient, and pressure gradient across the respiratory membrane. So how the thickness of respiratory membrane affects the diffusion of gases? So you think just logically. So if the thickness increases, what happens? There will be significant decrease in the gaseous end because it has to travel some more distance. So what we can infer from this, the rate of diffusion through the membrane is inversely proportional to the membrane thickness or diffusion distance, which is denoted by small d. So volume of gas diffused is inversely related to d. So any factor which increases thickness will therefore decrease the gaseous exchange. Examples like in some diseases, pulmonary edema and pulmonary fibrosis. And then surface area. So what happens if the surface area is more? Automatically the diffusion will be more. So we can infer that diffusion or volume of gas is directly related to the surface area. So rate of diffusion is directly proportional to surface area, that is, with the decrease in total surface area, rate of diffusion decreases. So some causes of decrease in surface area are pulmonectomy, where there is removal of complete lung, diseased lung, reduces the surface area to half of the normal. And in emphysema, many of the alveoli coalesce with dissolution of the alveolar walls, which causes the surface area to decrease. And the next one is diffusion coefficient. So what it infers, it also directly says that if the diffusion coefficient is more, there is more capacity to diffuse for the gas. So the rate of diffusion is directly proportional to the diffusion coefficient of gas. So it is for CO2 it is 20 times more than oxygen, and the CO2 diffuses much easily through the respiratory membrane. So it is, the diffusion coefficient is a function of molecular weight and solubility in a particular solvent and absolute temperature. So we can derive, or we can get the formula as diffusion coefficient is equal to solubility of gas divided by root of molecular weight of the gas, square root of molecular weight of the gas, solubility of gas and molecular weight. So diffusion coefficient depends on solubility and molecular weight of the gas, and here you remember CO2 has 20 times more diffusion coefficient than oxygen through water or liquid. And then next factor is pressure gradient across the respiratory membrane. So the rate of diffusion across the respiratory membrane is directly proportional to the pressure difference. So this is obvious. So if the pressure gradient is more, there will be more diffusion occurs across the membrane. So V gas is directly proportional to pressure gradient, that is PC, that is pulmonary capillary pressure in the pulmonary capillary minus pressure in the alveoli. So V gas, that is volume of gas, is equal to pressure gradient multiplied by diffusion coefficient and multiplied by surface area divided by small d, that is thickness of the respiratory membrane. So this is called Fick's law of diffusion. V gas is equal to pressure gradient multiplied by the diffusion coefficient and surface area of the respiratory membrane divided by small d or thickness of the respiratory membrane, which is nothing but Fick's law of diffusion. So in this slide, we'll see the diffusion of gases and their equilibration across the respiratory membrane. If you see in the inspired air, the partial pressures are like this, and in the alveoli, the partial pressure of oxygen is 104 and PCO2 is 40. So this is the venous side or right side of the heart. So what happens from the alveoli, the oxygen will enter into the capillary. So because the capillary venous side of blood is having lower partial pressure compared to the alveolar. So the gradient is 64 mmHg. So what happens as O2 diffuses from alveoli to blood, the PO2 becomes same as in the alveolar. So here also that PO2 will be becoming 104. So that is called equilibration point. So after the equilibrium reaches, there will be no exchange of gas occurs. So average pressure gradient is therefore calculated considering the pressure gradient at various sites and the time for which partial pressure gradient was present. So this integrated average pressure gradient for oxygen is about 11 mmHg. So what is the equilibration time for diffusion of oxygen is the blood remains for about 0.75 seconds in the capillary. So here in the capillary, the blood remains for about 0.75 seconds, that is called transit time. So normally enough oxygen diffuses across the respiratory membrane so that blood PO2 and alveolar PO2 equalizes or equilibrium happens in only one third of the transit time. So normal transit time is 0.75 and only one third, that means 0.25 seconds only, the equilibration of the oxygen gas occurs. So what is the use of that extra 0.50 seconds time for the blood staying in the capillary is that it acts as a safety margin, or it provides a safety margin that ensures adequate oxygen uptake during the periods of stress like exercise and exposure to high altitude or impaired diffusion. So this is an important point, transit time of the blood staying in the pulmonary capillary and the equilibration of the partial pressure of the oxygen. And then what is the use of that extra time remaining for in the blood capillary, that is otherwise it provides a safety margin in times of stress or impaired diffusion. And coming to the CO2, diffusion of CO2, so here the what is the pressure gradient? If you see, the pressure gradient is from the capillary to the alveolus, it is only very less, that is 45 in the capillary and 40 in the alveolus. So the pressure gradient in the beginning is 5 and the time integrated pressure gradient for CO2 is only 1 mmHg, whereas for oxygen it is 11 mmHg. Here it is only 1 mmHg. So the pressure gradient for CO2 is only 1/10 of the oxygen. CO2 diffuses almost 20 times more rapidly. So that's why though the pressure gradient is very less for CO2, its diffusion occurs rapidly compared to the oxygen. So this is how it happens, diffusion of gases and equilibration of the gases in the lungs. It is at the lung level, and if you see at the tissue level, the same happens for here on the right side. We can see left side, sorry. So if you see from the arterial side, the pulmonary capillary, there is partial pressure of oxygen 95, and in the interstitial fluid it is 40, and in the tissue POT is only 20. So 95 minus 20, how much it is? 75 pressure gradient is present. So easily the oxygen will be diffused to the tissues till the equilibrium is reached. And then if you see the CO2, in the capillaries the PCO2 is 45, and in the tissues it is 46. So again the gradient is 6 mmHg. So from the tissues the CO2 will enter or diffuse into the capillaries. So this is how from the tissue CO2 enters the capillaries, and from the capillaries oxygen enters into the tissues. So this CO2 will travel on the venous side, and then here at the lung side it will be expirated out. Sorry, here it will be expirated out. So now coming to the diffusion capacity of lung. So again it is the most important short question or very short question. So what it is the quantitative expression of ability of the respiratory membrane to exchange a gas between alveoli and pulmonary blood. And it is defined as volume of gas that diffuse through the respiratory membrane each minute for pressure gradient of 1 mmHg. So the factors affecting diffusion capacity are the same as the factors affecting the respiratory membrane, diffusion across the respiratory membrane. So you can just refer that once. And then DLO2, what is this? It is the diffusion capacity of lungs for oxygen. So at rest, the DLO2 is about 20 to 25 ml per minute per mmHg. So during exercise, this diffusion capacity may be increased to up to 65 ml per minute per mmHg. So this is due to increase in the surface area of respiratory membrane and also improvement in ventilation perfusion ratio during the exercise. And then DLCO2. So it is difficult to measure because of technical difficulties. That's because of the pressure gradient for PCO2 is only 1 mmHg. So such small difference cannot be detected. But however, from the available knowledge about CO2 diffusion coefficient, we can estimate that at rest diffusion capacity is about 20 times that for oxygen. So it is about 400 to 500 ml per minute per mmHg. So what is the clinical significance of this higher diffusion capacity of CO2 means? So when the diffusion capacity of respiratory membrane is decreased due to certain diseases, what happens? One expects that there will be retention of CO2 and lack of oxygen, but it is not correct. So because of the vast difference in the diffusion capacity of oxygen and CO2, there is serious impairment of diffusion of oxygen, causes significant lack of oxygen with little signs of CO2. So CO2 does not retain very much as the oxygen diffusion is impaired. So that is the because of higher diffusion capacity of carbon dioxide. So it is one important point. So even though the in times of impaired diffusion of the lungs, the CO2 retention is not very significant compared to the oxygen impairment or oxygen diffusion across the membrane impairs. So how to measure the diffusion capacity of lung? So it is by simple formula called Fick's law. So DL is equal to V by PA minus PC. So it is V is nothing but volume of the gas uptaken in 1 minute, and PA means partial pressure of gas in the alveoli, and C is capillary blood. So pressure, nothing but pressure gradient. So from this formula we can calculate the diffusion capacity of the various gases. So now we'll go into our main topic, transport of carbon dioxide in blood. So venous blood contains about 52 ml and arterial blood about 48 ml of carbon dioxide per 100 ml. So thus there is 4 ml of carbon dioxide transported per 100 ml of blood from tissues to the lungs. So the total CO2 transported from whole body tissue cells at rest with a cardiac output of 5 liters is about 4 into 5000 by 100 or 200 ml per minute. So this carbon dioxide is transported in 3 forms. So as you have seen in the oxygen transport, we have there are 2 forms: transport of oxygen in dissolved form and transport with combination with hemoglobin. So here we'll see in 3 forms. One is dissolved, and one is bicarbonate form, and one is carbamino compound form. So we will see one by one in detail. So in dissolved form, the venous blood with PCO2 45 mmHg contains 2.7 ml per 100 ml of CO2 in dissolved form. In the arterial blood with PCO2 of 40 mmHg contains 2.4 ml per 100 ml of CO2 in dissolved form. So the difference is 0.3 ml of CO2 which is transported in dissolved state per 100 ml of blood from tissues to the lungs. So this represents a 7% of total transport of carbon dioxide. The next is the major bicarbonate form transport. So here after the CO2 enters the blood cell, what is happening? CO2 is mixing or combining with water, which is very fast reaction mediated by carbonic anhydrase enzyme abundantly present in the RBCs, will form carbonic acid H2CO3, which will again dissociate to bicarbonate and H plus ion. So this bicarbonate ion will easily diffuse out of the RBC into the plasma, and this H plus ion will combine with hemoglobin to form hydrogenated hemoglobin. So this is the process of CO2 entering from the tissues into the blood cell. So for exchange, what happens when the bicarbonate ion is moving out of the cell? The negativity inside the cell is decreasing. So in order to balance that negativity or neutralize this effect, negatively charged chloride ions will be moving into the RBC to replace the bicarbonate. So this movement of chloride ions into the RBC is nothing but chloride shift or hamburger phenomenon, and this occurs very rapidly and is completed within 1 second. So one important point here is that because of this chloride shift, total number of ions inside the RBCs will increase. So the osmotic pressure inside the RBC become higher than that of plasma. So this causes osmotic absorption of fluid. So when the osmolality increases inside the RBC, osmotic pressure, it will absorb the fluid from the plasma. So thus venous RBC contain greater quantity of fluid as compared to the arterial blood RBC. So because of this reason, PCV of venous blood is slightly higher than arterial blood, and venous RBCs are more fragile than arterial RBC. Okay, so did you get this? What is happening? The ions, number of ions is increasing inside the RBC. So the osmotic pressure increases, which will cause absorption of fluid from the plasma, and which is the reason why venous blood PCV is little more than the arterial blood, and these RBCs are fragile. And the next form is carbamino compound form. So the bicarbonate form transport is the major. 70% of the transport occurs in the form of bicarbonate, and this carbamino compound form accounts to 23% of the transport. So after the entering CO2 enters the blood, some combines with amino group of proteins to form the carbamino compounds. So in plasma, CO2 combines with amino group to form carbamino proteins. So this is the reaction. which is much less significant because quantity of proteins is only 1/4 that of hemoglobin. But in RBC, it combines with amino group of HB, forming the carbaminohemoglobin. So this is the reaction. So this is a reversible reaction that occurs with a loose bond, so that CO2 is easily released into the alveoli, where PCO2 is lower than that in the tissues. So, and also this reaction, okay, reversible, already I have told you, it is slower than the reaction of CO2 with water because more CO2 is transported as bicarbonates than carbamino compounds. Okay. So this is the CO2 dissociation curve, which shows that this curve is almost linear when compared to the O2 dissociation curve. And it is important to note that practically in the body, the PCO2 value of arterial and venous blood varies within a narrow range. So, full range of CO2 dissociation curve is only experimental phenomenon and it does not operate in the body practically. So, we'll see few factors affecting this curve. So, first one is oxygen concentration. So, deoxyhemoglobin present in tissue capillaries is capable of loading more CO2 than oxyhemoglobin. So, oxygenation of hemoglobin in the lungs increases the CO2 unloading, which is called Haldane's effect. So, this Haldane's effect on the transport of CO2, how it affects the curve. So, if we see at PCO2, at PO2 of 40 mmHg, blood PCO2. So, this is PO2 of 40 mmHg and this curve is PO2 at 100. So at PO2 of 40 mmHg, the CO2 concentration in the blood is more here compared to the PO2 of 100 mmHg and CO2 concentration in blood. So this means that what is happening at the tissue level, blood with PCO2 reaching the tissues is capable of drawing CO2 more from the tissues at lesser PO2 compared to the higher PO2. So because of Haldane's effect, CO2 dissociation curve shift to left when blood flows from in the tissues. Okay, so in tissues at only PO2 of 40, more CO2 is drawn into the blood. And the same curve shifts to right when the blood reaches the lungs. So blood with PCO2 of 45 mmHg in the lungs is capable of retaining less or capable of releasing more CO2 in the lungs at PO2 of 100 mmHg. So Haldane's effect shifts the curve to right when blood flows in the pulmonary capillaries. So there is only narrow range where the dissociation curve operates, that is from here to here, and the oxygen is the main important determinant factor of CO2 dissociation. And the next factor which affects the curve is DPG. So DPG decreases the formation of carbaminohemoglobin because it competes with CO2 for the same site on hemoglobin. So it shifts the curve to right. That means CO2 carrying capacity is decreased. And increase in body temperature causes release of CO2 from the blood, which shifts the curve to left. So that's all. We have seen the curve and the factors, 3 factors: oxygen, 3 DPG, and then increase in body temperature, how these factors affect the curve. And next we will see. So here we'll see the CO2 release. So how it is released, again it is released from the 3 forms, that is carbonate, carbaminohemoglobin and dissolved state. So here in this picture we'll see release of CO2 from carbonate into the plasma. So the oxyhemoglobin formed in the RBCs is a strong acid. So increased acidity of blood results in increased H+ ion concentration. So to neutralize it, the bicarbonate ions diffuse into the RBC. So the bicarbonate ions diffuse into the RBCs and where H plus react with bicarbonate to form H2O and CO2. So this whole reaction occurs again in presence of carbonic anhydrase enzyme. So CO2 released, diffused into the plasma from the RBC into the plasma and then into the alveoli. So with the movement of bicarbonate inside the RBC, the cell becomes more negative. To neutralize them, either positive charge cation should move in or negative charge ion should flow out of the cell. So RBC membrane, as you know, it is relatively impermeable to cations. Chloride anions return in the plasma from the RBC. So from the RBC already during the at the tissue level, chloride shift or Hamburger phenomenon has occurred. In the RBCs there are chloride ions. So those chloride ions will return from the RBC into the plasma. So this is called a reversal of chloride shift. So reversal of chloride shift occurs at the lung level and chloride shift occurs at the tissue level. So you remember this point. To enters the RBC and converts the deoxyhemoglobin to oxyhemoglobin, which has low affinity for oxygen and releases the, so here H plus is coming out. This H plus will combine with bicarbonate to form CO2 and OH minus. So this CO2 is again released from the carbaminohemoglobin into the plasma. So this is called Haldane effect. And the next form is dissolved. So carbonate form already we have seen, that is reversal of chloride shift. The same thing which I have explained you in the previous slide. So here oxygen enters into the RBC, combines with the hemoglobin to form HbO2. So this H plus will combine with the, so increase the acidity in the RBC occurs, so that causes HCO3 to move inside, so which will cause CO2 to exhale outside into the alveoli, and chloride ions from the RBC will move out into the plasma, causing reversal chloride shift. And then dissolved form, so diffusion of CO2 from plasma to alveoli. So PCO2 of plasma of pulmonary arterial blood is 45 mmHg and PCO2 of alveolar air is 40. So the pressure gradient of 5 mmHg for CO2 is present. So that allows the transport of CO2 from plasma to the alveoli. So in this picture, in the first slide only I have explained you. Okay. So one more important topic from CO2 transport is respiratory quotient, which may come again as very short or short question. So it refers to the ratio of CO2 excretion and rate of oxygen consumption per minute, which normally is 4 ml of CO2 excretion and 5 ml of oxygen consumption. The normal value is 0.8. So it depends upon the type of fuel, that is type of food we consume. So for carbohydrates, who the persons taking carbohydrates as the entire source, it is ratio will be 1. And for proteins and fats as complete source, the ratio will be less than 1. And for fats only, it is 0.7. So why? Because 0.7 molecules of CO2 are formed for each molecule of O2 consumed in the metabolism of fat. So thus, a lower RQ suggests that greater than usual proportion of proteins and fats are being catabolized in the body. And the RQ can be easily estimated by knowing the amount of O2 removed from inspired air and the amount of CO2 added to the expired air per minute. So in this picture again you can see depending on the fuel or respiratory substrate, the RQ values are like this. And one more important point about CO2 transport is the vehicle for CO2 transport. So the carbon dioxide dissociation curve of plasma, bicarbonate and whole blood, and the amount of CO2 can be loaded and unloaded from the tissues at PCO2 of 45 mmHg reveal that plasma is not a good transport vehicle, as very small amount of CO2, only 0.2 ml, can be taken from tissues per 100 ml of blood per minute. And the bicarbonate solution is also a not good transport, because beyond PO2 40 mmHg there is no further transport of CO2. but only the whole blood is an ideal vehicle for transport of CO2 to load itself in tissues with CO2 and to release CO2 in the lungs. Okay. So, and the rate of total CO2 transport in resting conditions for each 100 ml of blood transports about 4 ml of CO2 from the tissues to lungs. Thus, with average cardiac output of 5 liters, a total of 200 ml of CO2 is transported per minute. So, during exercise, this will be increasing depending upon the severity of exercise. Okay. So this is all the theory part about the CO2 transport, and next we'll have some assignment. So I'm not going to give the answers, so you write down all this, read the question and write down in the paper and post in the group. So this is the first question. And then this is the second question. Third question. So I have given from oxygen transport also. You can do this. And these are few problems. Calculate the percentage saturation and calculate the oxygen content. So for these 4 or 5 questions you have to answer, and if you want you can write 1 or 2 sentences explanation and then post in the group. That's all. Thank you.